Hi guys, so the other week I said that I was going to put a video together to just help you guys out with going through your running program and fueling effectively for your training, especially now because many of you are doing, say, 2 boot camps, maybe even 3 boot camps a week, and then adding on your 2 runs because you're hitting run 1 and run 2 on your weekly run program that you're following along with regards to prepping for the Willis Fitness 10K in June. So I've put together just a couple of notes on the whiteboard to help me talk through it. I'm going to try and talk through it in about 5 minutes, give you guys an insight into how I would run something like this on like a one-to-one basis, what you should be thinking about, obviously speaking as general as I can, trying to touch on something for each and every one of you that's following the program. So fueling your running. I'm going to come to the caution at the end because there's a message that I really want you to focus on and not get lost in everything that I'm about to go through. First thing that I want to touch on is, as I said, I'm speaking to everyone here that is prepping for the obstacle course run in October, prepping for the Willis Fitness 10K, so everyone's goal might be slightly different. But for the most part, with taking part in boot camp, with tracking as you do and things like that, we tend to work towards like a maintenance, performance, or perhaps a slight fat loss goal over time as the year goes on. So performance being, you know, getting stronger, fitter at boot camp with your running and things like that. Obviously fat loss being holding yourself in a calorie deficit and performing well at the same time. Sometimes they can butt heads, and what we want to do is try and meet in the middle as best as possible, especially because we're throwing in that running program on top. The reason I'm going through this now is because through April and May, no matter which program you're on, and we're now back outside with boot camp, so the intensity has gone up a notch or 5 even, the runs are going to get longer, so fueling things over the next few months is going to be super key. So your goal is obviously personal to you as to how or where you sit within kind of wanting to achieve some fat loss results and things like that, but at the kind of foundation of that, we still have to make sure we're fueling appropriately for performance so that we can perform really well and stay in that slight calorie deficit over time, and as I said, try and meet in the middle rather than tank your calories as low as you can, try and perform as best you can. It's just going to butt heads. Okay, so how do we go about that? Well, we're going to touch on calories first, then I'm going to touch on the 2 that are super key for performance and recovery. So calories is energy, and it's going to fuel your performance. Energy is going to give you, you know, eating, consuming energy, bringing in energy through your food and drink is going to give you that energy to go and perform. So it's super important that we've got that balance right. Now, if you're unsure as to where to kind of sit that balance, if you're feeling hungry all the time, really struggling to recover from training, whether that be boot camps or running or adding them both together, chances are you're not quite eating enough. Jump on a TDEE calculator, which I can link below, and put in your details and see where you're at, and just use something like MyFitnessPal maybe for a couple of days just to track your calories and see if there's a big difference between what you should be eating and where you're sitting. Realistically, all of you should be at least consuming 1400 calories a day minimum, and I'm talking to the smallest women within the group there when I'm saying that as a minimum. Okay, so making sure that we've got enough calories coming in to balance our goals. So obviously if we've got too many calories coming in, chances are we might be gaining body fat at a really kind of slow steady rate or quite a quick rate, and we might be over fueling our performance. There's a balancing act to be done, but it's not as scary as it sounds. It's just understanding where we should be sitting. So as I said, minimum 1400, and that's for the smallest females within the group. I would say probably, giving a general number, if you're 2 boot camps a week and you're on the running program, you're going to want at least 1600 a day, if not heading towards 2000, somewhere in that bracket. Okay, to give you a clue, I consume over 2000 calories a day, so that gives you a clue as to kind of the energy that's going out and making sure we're bringing in enough on the back end. So the energy that we want to bring in, where do we want to bring it in from? Well, we're going to touch on protein first. Now, protein is essential. It's an essential macronutrient. It, you know, derives within food, and it gives us amino acids that we can't create ourselves. which help with things like recovery. They help with bone health, skin health, hair health, nail health, heart health, blood circulation, but also protein is the big provider of our strength, our recovery, and our rebuilding of our muscles as they go through that kind of breakdown and rebuild process every time we train, every time we exert them. So it's 4 calories per gram, just to give you that as a kind of indicator as to how many calories are in a gram of protein. Now, I would always recommend at least trying to hit 80 grams per day. Okay, so generally speaking, you really want to be hitting at least 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. So I weigh 66 kilos, and if I'm tracking, I'm aiming for at least 80 on a low day, but probably more like 100 grams of protein per day. So somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, that's the science there for it. But really, simply, if we're not going to track, we need to look at our plates. We need to look at our breakfast, which is a super key one. Lunch and dinner are a little bit easier, and we need to go, where's my protein source? So is there meat, is there fish, is there dairy? One of those, or is there a meat alternative? Look at those meals and spot your protein source. If you can't spot your protein source, that's my aim for you. Start getting an obvious protein source in each meal. Breakfast, lunch and dinner. Breakfast tends to be the harder one. You've got things like eggs, good source of fats and proteins, fish, salmon, things like that, or overnight oats, protein powder, protein yogurts, things like that. They work a treat for me for that first hit of say 20-25 grams of protein at the start of the day. Be aware, I don't want to go off track too much, but be aware of using things like nuts for protein, because they are super high in calories, and you don't get that much carryover of protein from the nuts that you're consuming within that. So potentially things like your yogurts, jerkies, things like that, little snacks like that, protein bars to a point, but also just making sure that your 3 meals are big enough and actually just have a decent 30-ish gram serving of protein within each one. Okay, so that would be the simplest way. If we're not tracking, look at each main meal, find me 20 to 30 grams within each main meal. You have 3 main meals where you're hitting between 60 and 90 without accounting for snacks and any additional protein within the different food sources there within that meal. Okay, so protein is super key, needs to be in every meal going forwards. The recipe book's got loads of ideas for that. Carbs, the one that everyone tends to be scared of. Well, it's the body's main energy source. We need carbs. I am a carb monster. I do not particularly live well without them. Same again, 4 calories per gram. So we're looking at carbs. I'm not really going to give you a specific number to aim for because everyone's different, but realistically we want to be getting at least over 100 grams of carbs in per day. Otherwise we're kind of classing ourselves as on a low carb diet. Now, carbs are the main source of energy for the body and the main source of energy for the brain. We store carbs within our liver to provide energy to our brain. Hence why if you've not eaten for a while perhaps, or you've trained really hard and your body's raided the liver for some carbs for the energy for the training session, you can get like that foggy head, kind of post-training and things like that. And with our carbs, again, we want to be thinking about most meals, okay? Not necessarily every meal, but most meals. And what I would maybe say towards that is putting them around your runs. So if you've got like your big run, say run 1 is now creeping up to 4 or 5 miles, potentially looking, if you're going on the Friday morning, having a decent carby dinner on the Thursday evening. So we're just looking ahead 24 hours. What's my training volume look like that day? Can I filter carbs into the 12-hour, 16-hour prep before that window? Especially if you're going to get up and run without breakfast, you want to make sure you're getting some carbs in at night or the night before. And that really brings me on to your food timing and how you balance your calories and things like that. You want to be looking at your training across the week and then looking at your days that are your hardest training days. Perhaps maybe it's going from a Thursday boot camp into a long run on the Friday, then maybe going into Saturday boot camp, something like that, where there's some intense work being done over 2 to 3 days. On those days, building up to your run would be a good idea to creep your calories up a little bit more. So if your maintenance is around 1600-1700, we know we're going to burn a good amount of calories on our run. perhaps go up to say 1800 the day before, extra carbs with dinner. We then filter into our run on the Friday morning. That's just one example. You could do the same for perhaps you're running and boot camping on the Tuesday, so you're fitting them into the one day. We need to be making sure that our lunch between the two of them has got that energy and that protein back in it. So we're topping up the body on both ways, recovery and energy. And perhaps again, that night before the Monday, we're thinking about a nice carby dinner so that we can then roll that into the Tuesday morning run, for example. So carbs don't need to be in every meal per se, but they can be spotted around our training because they're going to fuel our training and we're going to utilize them better. We're going to utilize that glucose that's sat in the muscles and we're going to put it to good work because that's what it's there for. It's stored in the muscles, ready for us to work. So it's just about having a play with your food timing. I can't give you all specific, you know, usually this then, but if you're doing, like I said, twice on a Tuesday, think about your lunch, think about your dinner on the Monday, and then think about replanning after boot camp on the Tuesday. Make sure there's an obvious protein source, meat, fish, meat alternative, dairy, across every meal. And then make sure that your carbs, you're just putting them to good use and you're not avoiding them because they're going to be where we're going to get that natural energy from. Unless you really like fats, for example, you can obviously increase fats that way as well. All I want to say to finish is like a word of caution. Don't, or try to avoid, looking at MyFitnessPal or looking at your Fitbit tracker or looking at your Apple Watch, whatever piece of tech it is that you're using, and it says on your run you burned 672 calories. Then you go, cool, I can eat another 672 calories. We really want to avoid eating back the calories that we're burning on, or that our watch is saying we're burning. Okay, use a TDE calculator if you want to work out roughly where you should sit. Use your watch as a guide, but understand it could be plus and minus wrong by anywhere between 200 and 400 calories, either way. So it's a guide and it's an educative tool and it's an accountability tracker. They're brilliant for that. But what we don't want to do is take it as gospel and eat back that many calories and put ourselves into a surplus unknowingly, okay? Whereby we're over consuming for what we need. Look at your running and your training days, your busier days, or where they stack up, and think about a number like, if you're in a deficit, say, across the week, you take 300 calories a day off of where you should be. So you should be 2,000 calories a day. Trying to drop body fat, we're eating 1,700 a day. On your running days, I would eat maybe 1,900, or the day before that running day, eat 1,900. We know we're going to increase that deficit because we know we're going for the run, but we're not specifically trying to pick the correct number each time. We're just allowing ourselves 200 extra calories, which would probably more likely come from a 70-30 split of protein and carbs, something like that. So that's me trying to take you guys through it with obviously as much detail as possible and hopefully enough examples that help individually. If you've got any questions, shoot me a message and I'll be happy to help. I'll put the TDE calculator in the group and you can put your details in that way. If you're then unsure as to what it throws out, feel free to obviously ask any questions, as I said, but just think about obvious protein in every meal, maybe a few extra calories the day before those big training days or run days, and really think about fueling your performance. We're now training anywhere between 3 and 5 times a week with boot camp and the running. The running's getting longer and longer each time, so let that food fuel your performance and take away any stress around it for me. Hope that helps.